Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving into what some are calling Trump's Chamberlain moment, a notion suggesting that abandoning Ukraine now could be, a historic mistake.
Yep, right. It's a heavy topic. How do you see the whole concept unfolding in terms of history and policy?
Well, to start, it's important to remember that Ukraine's modern history really began after the Soviet Union fell apart in 1991. Ukraine emerged as an independent nation, but was still entangled with Russian interests.
And that complexity is magnified by Ukraine once having a huge nuclear arsenal, isn't it?
Exactly. Ukraine had the third largest nuclear arsenal in the world, but in 1994, through the Budapest Memorandum, Ukraine agreed to give up those weapons. In return, the United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia promised to respect its independence, sovereignty,
Right on.
and borders.
So that deal was meant to secure Ukraine's future. But what happened after that?
Things took a dramatic turn in 2014 when, under Putin's direction, Russia invaded and annexed Crimea and supported separatists in the Donbass region. This wasn't just a minor scuffle. It was the first forcible land grab in Europe since World War II.
That really set the stage for the later, even more intense, full-scale invasion in 2022, right?
Absolutely. Russia's 2022 invasion aimed to overthrow the elected government in Kyiv, crush Ukrainian independence, and reassert dominance over a former Soviet territory. This not only shattered the relatively peaceful state of Europe, it also put the international order on
Exactly.
notice.
And then we get into the crossfire of U.S. policy. Trump's record on Ukraine certainly adds another layer.
Yes. Trump's approach has been very transactional. Let's recall that back in 2019 he withheld nearly $400 million in military aid to Ukraine, aid that was already approved by Congress. He compounded that by pressuring Ukraine's president to investigate Joe Biden
Right, that's a
and his son
massive
Hunter.
misstep. That move eventually led to his impeachment, didn't it?
It did, and it highlights a concerning attitude. Instead of strategic foresight, there was a focus on personal gain and political maneuvering.
And now, as discussions around policy get heated again, Trump is voicing opinions about ending the war in Ukraine in just 24 hours. Can that really be taken at face value?
Now, there's a point where I have to respectfully challenge that notion. I mean, claiming something as drastic as ending the war in under a day just by pressuring Ukraine into making territorial concessions seems overly simplistic and possibly dangerous.
Definitely. It almost sounds like a rehash of the old appeasement strategies, doesn't it?
Exactly. It echoes the infamous Chamberlain moment in 1938 when British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain conceded the Sudetenland to Hitler in a bid for peace. Chamberlain believed that appeasement would secure peace, but, as we know, it only emboldened aggression.
Yeah. So Trump's approach, by suggesting concessions to Russia, could be seen as an attempt to avoid conflict at the cost of enduring principles.
Right. And that's the core of the critique. Abandoning Ukraine isn't merely about pulling support. It's a betrayal of commitment to allies and of core American values like deterrence and credibility.
Absolutely. And if the U.S. were to pull back, what would, the ripple effects be globally?
The consequences would be huge. First, without U.S. backing, Ukraine's ability to defend itself would be severely compromised, potentially leading to Russia seizing more territory or installing a puppet regime in Kyiv.
Yes, definitely a dangerous precedent. And then there's the impact on U.S. allies. How would countries like Poland, Japan, or Taiwan see this shift?
They'd see it as a signal that America is, no longer standing as a reliable partner. From NATO allies to nations in Asia, this could, undermine trust in U.S. commitments and embolden other authoritarian regimes, like Putin's Russia or even Xi Jinping's China.
Right, it's a trust issue. It's interesting and frankly alarming how merging foreign policy with politics can shift a nation's global stance.
Yeah, and when you align that with appeasement, it's almost like saying, let's avoid conflict at any cost. That sounds so much like the mistakes of the 1930s.
Exactly. But some might argue that stepping back could, in reduce direct involvement in conflict. What do you say to that?
Sure. On the surface, non-involvement might seem like a way to dodge messy engagements. However, history has taught us that failing to stand firm only invites more aggression. It's like, if you tip the scales towards appeasement, you risk criminally undermining global security.
Agreed, that's a solid point. So in essence, abandoning Ukraine could signal that America's word is no longer its bond.
Yes, absolutely. Without that trust, the U.S. risks delegitimizing its role as a global leader. That would mean a loss not only for Ukraine, but for the broader system of international security and democratic ideals.
Right. And that's especially dangerous considering the current geopolitical climate, where authoritarian regimes are already testing boundaries.
Exactly. This isn't about being the world's policeman. It's about upholding a framework of alliances and deterrence that, when it works, prevents larger wars.
It seems like a classic case of risking long-term stability for short-term political gains.
Yeah, and think of the message it sends. If America abandons Ukraine, what stops other nations from, well, rethinking their own commitments to U.S. security guarantees?
Definitely a slippery slope. That could very well lead to a fragmentation of the global order as we know it.
Precisely, and the fallout would be immense. It could embolden not just Russia, but other authoritarian states to act more aggressively, presuming they can do so with impunity.
And it makes you wonder, what are we really sacrificing on the altar of political expediency?
It's the principle of deterrence, the legacy of our alliances, and the ideal that strength comes from commitments rather than empty rhetoric. It's like, you wouldn't build a house on a shaky foundation, right?
So, wrapping this up, standing by Ukraine isn't charity. It's a strategic imperative. It requires a commitment to historical lessons and to maintaining a world order that discourages further aggression.
Exactly. In the end, if America walks away, we're in danger of repeating the mistakes of the past, like Chamberlain's appeasement, which only paved the way for even greater conflicts.
And that's something we really need to think about as we face another election cycle and shape our foreign policy vision. Thanks for the insightful discussion.